Hello, everybody. This is Zach's at it again. I'm your host, Zach Cooley, and it is truly an honor, really a career pinnacle for me to have on the phone with me today a living rock and roll legend. In my 20 years of doing this, I have never interviewed a rock legend, and it is an honor to have on the show today Mr. Jim Messina. Thank you, Mr. Messina, for being on the program for me today.
My pleasure.
It's I really am honored and privileged. I have been trying to do my research as best I could so that I would not ask you questions that you were not asked over and over, but that seems virtually impossible because the track of your career and the things that people are interested in run along the same lines because you have had a very rich career in rock and roll. I will tell you, I was born in 1985 with cerebral palsy, and I've been bound to a wheelchair all my life. And music took me to places that my life could not necessarily. And when kids would go to malls, kids my age would go to malls, they would want a toy. Well, I would have to buy a cassette single. I would have to go into the record shop and buy a tape of some kind. So I can remember being 4 years old and having the single of Poco's "Call It Love." I remember the yellow background and the cover of that, and absolutely. So, can you tell me, just to satisfy my own curiosity, about your memories of making that song and how that came to be?
Well, we were in the process of doing a reunion Poco album with all the original members. It was about 1989, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, we all had our own original songs, but the manager was looking to see if we could find something that might be a little different, for that time. There was some writers who out of Nashville who had written that song. And we listened to it, and the guitar solo that was there, I thought was very good. I didn't think that I could improve upon it because it was a written part of the arrangement that seemed to go so well. So I remember writing it down note for note and learning it note for note. There was a little bit of a struggle with that particular song because one of our members, Richie Fiore, had become a Christian minister. And there were some lyrics that he just didn't feel he wanted to sing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was almost lost, but I intervened and asked the manager if I could give a shot at maybe making some changes to it that might be more acceptable. And the writers, once I finished, they listened to it and they said that was acceptable. So I was able to recover the song for the band, which ended up really, I think, being a very popular song. And I'm glad that we were able to straighten out the issue. We also had an issue with the video. Richie did not like the original video, thought it was too sexy. So we had to go in and reshoot that to make it more acceptable to him, which we did. And the video came out very good. I don't think we lost anything by doing that, but it just set us back in time to be able to release it. But all in all, it was a fun song to do. And I'm considering, even though I didn't sing it, a lot of people would love to hear it. So I'm thinking about maybe re-recording it. I should say rehearsing it so that we could go out and play it live. I'm looking to see if we can get Richie to do some dates with us, with me, I should say. And in doing so, perhaps we might add that song to the repertoire of the set.
Oh, that would be amazing. It's too bad you couldn't do it in time for the show on March the 12th, which is why I'm lucky enough to be talking to you, because you're coming to our very small town of Wytheville, Virginia, to the Millwald Theatre, and that would be my next question. I'm sure this is your first time to Wytheville, which is a very tiny town in southwest Virginia, very Mayberry-like.
Uh-huh.
This is your first time to Wytheville. I know this is your first time performing here, because this is the first time that we've had a performing house. But will this be your first time visiting Wytheville?
I think so, unless I was there and fell asleep through the whole process.
Yeah.
It's a small town, and I have done so many shows all over the United States that it's hard for me to remember them unless I've done it 2 or 3 times,
Right, which is another part of why it's so exciting that you're here, because you could do shows all over the United States and probably sell out, but somebody somewhere for you picked our wonderful small town, and we are so fortunate that you're coming. It's one of.
Tell me one thing that we would like to make sure that we can do our very best too to get as many tickets sold for the venue. I mean, they make money as well. But if there's any other avenues that you could suggest that I could have Phyllis contact, if there's a weekly entertainment magazine, or is there radio stations in that town that are classic rock that you could turn us on to?
I will get in touch with Phyllis, and I will give her every avenue that I know of.
That would be wonderful, because we'd love to see some new faces in that venue.
And she's welcome to share this podcast and my articles anywhere she likes. Because this, as I said, this is a pinnacle for me to be able to interview someone like you. And we're very honored and happy that you're coming to the Millwald. It is a former vaudeville theater that's just been restored a couple of years ago. It's a 500-seater, very intimate setting.
Fantastic. Those are the theaters that usually have the stage blowing down toward the audience, and I'm always amazed when I step on one of those, because I know it's old because the stage is crooked.
Right. Well, this is 1927 or 28, I believe, that this was built. It's a beautiful theater. Do you find that it's a different experience performing in small towns? Do you like the intimate settings? Most artists do.
Yeah, because I've played stadiums and I've played coliseums, and of course, it's wonderful to play the Oakland Coliseum or play New York at that huge place. I can't remember it right now.
Right.
Madison
Square Garden. Mm-hmm.
But it's also wonderful to hit a small town. We usually get there, 12, 1 o'clock, walk around a little bit, have a sandwich, look at some of the shops, and then go do a sound check. And then there's this wonderful theater that has so much history. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we see names, and there are people that have been gone for 50, 75 years, and their name and their performances are still very much a part of the history. The theaters have always been interesting to me, because at one point in time, when I was married to my first wife, who's an actress and a director, mm-hmm. Her main stage and her father's main activity in life. He was Barry Sullivan, the actor, who was also stage and screen star. The theaters have always had a special relationship, because they have such a history, and if they could speak, if they could talk, they could tell us an awful lot about what went on behind those walls, both good, bad, and entertaining. So theaters are pretty special places.
And wouldn't we love to hear it all? I just love nostalgia, period. Now, Do you have a memoir out, Mr. Messina? Because I was not able to find one when I was doing my research.
I've avoided them only because every time I was approached to do one to help write, they want to hear the nasty, angry side of life, and that's just not who I am. And I've turned down about everything. I may consider doing one. I've got a lot of recordings and interviews of my guys talking, and at one point in time, I thought I might just put one out called "From the Horse's Mouth," and pretty much have it an audio book of different interviews that were done by each of the guys in Loggins Messina or whatever, and narrated by myself, so that I'm not having to satisfy some co-writer who thinks it's not, hot enough or.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Well, if you ever are looking for a co-writer that's not interested in the salacious stuff, that just wants to capture rock and roll history, let me know. We'll see how well you like this article that turns out. And
I would love to read it.
And if you're ever interested in just putting down the history, let me know, because that would be a privilege, especially when you go over your repertoire that kind of begins, at least most famously anyway, with Buffalo Springfield. You came to him a little bit after For What It's Worth and Bluebird, but I saw an interview where you had said that these were songs that you listened to before you became a part of the group. So what was it like becoming a part of a group that you were a fan of? Did that have any kind of a different feel to it as opposed to other groups you've joined?
Well, it wasn't so much that I was a fan. I worked at a recording studio called Sunset Sound Recorders.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the second engineer behind Bruce Spotnick, who was already there. Teddy Camarada, who owned it and did most of the music for Disney, and a lot of the Brazil 66 and Tijuana Brass and all that stuff. They wanted another studio to be able to do more rock music, because that studio was pretty much set for strings and doing the upscale pop stuff. So they hired me away from another studio named Audio Arts, gave me a room to work in. And I remember a couple times going home, because I worked pretty late. Sometimes I was there till, maybe 2, 3 in the morning. And driving back to Burbank, I would listen to the radio, and I remember hearing this song called Bluebird by the Buffalo Springfield. And I had never heard that name, and I'd never heard their music. And because the acoustic guitar and the harmonies and the drumming and all that stuff was just, to me, very unique and very positive, yet it fell into the category of how I was raised. I was raised, originally born in California, Maywood, but raised in Texas until I was about in the 4th grade. And my parents were, my dad was more into sort of, I guess you would have to call it swing, country swing, Spade Cooley and Bob Wilson, the Texas Playboys and stuff like that.
Dixieland type thing.
Well, it wasn't Dixieland. It was more of I know the word for it, but I can't think of it right now. But it was more of a Texas swing, kind of sound. And then on the other side of the family, they were into. My dad was into, as I said, into that style of music. Mm-hmm. But on the other side of the family, they were listening to like Hank Snow and Hank Williams and Johnny Cash. And my mother was more of a rock and roller. She liked what they called race music back in those days, and also rock and roll. So I had a lot of musical influences in my life, and so the Buffalo Springfield, I also liked Earl Scruggs, and I was just thinking out loud here for a moment. I also did a song for Earl Scruggs called "The Banjo Man," on his 25th anniversary album. So that was kind of, Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs was in my household. So that was kind of fun to be able to contribute to that. But the Buffalo Springfield, as we were talking about, just had a sound that felt more comfortable to me rather than acid rock or all the crazy stuff that was going on in the
Right.
So anyway, one day I show up to the studio and I'm suddenly put into a situation. It actually all occurred first because David Crosby, my studio manager, whose name was Gypsy, said to me, "Could you come in tomorrow morning at around 10 o'clock? We've got a demo that we need to make real quick." And David Crosby's booking the studio. And I went, "David Crosby?" I said, "That name is familiar." I said, "Is that Bing Crosby's son?" She goes, No, it's not. And I wouldn't ask if I were you. So anyway,
Right.
I show up the next morning, and they want me to do an acoustic recording, just one mic for vocal and one mic for guitar, and makes me turn off all the lights. He says, "Here, I want you to plug this in here." And I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "Just plug it in." And I plugged it in, and it had goo inside of it. And I thought, "What is this?" Well, turns out it was a lava lamp. Anyway, I plugged it in, and a young woman shows up, and I put her, in front of the microphone, make sure she could see, and went into the control room. We started recording song after song, and I remember as I'm listening to the songs, thinking, "Wow, these songs are pretty neat. They're very, very original," and they were the kind of songs that, especially in the dark, because he had everything kind of turned down so that there was very little light in the control room and in the studio. The lyrics kind of came alive with pictures and images, something that was very different from the music that I had been working with on a daily basis. So when the session was over, I said, "Who should I put down as producer?" And he goes, "You put David Crosby." I'm thinking, should I ask him? No, I'm not going to do that. Who should I put down as the singer? He said, "You can put down as the artist Joni Mitchell." So it was at that time that I first really became aware of Joni Mitchell. That was that particular demo because it became her album. And from that session, David went to the guys in the Buffalo Springfield and said, "Hey, I've been working with a young engineer over at Sunset Sound that I think might work for you guys really well." So it was that connection that they came in and booked the session, and I started listening to some of the tapes because the first person I came in contact was Neil. Neil had brought a bunch of 8-track tapes that they had recorded over at Columbia when Ahmed Erdogan was last working with them.
Wow.
And as I'm going through listening to some of these tapes, I come across this song called Bluebird, and I went, "Wow, this is that song that I heard when I was driving home one night that I really liked." And that, for me, was a nice charge, not as a band, but just to think that I might be working with somebody whose music that I like, that I can relate to. And that's kind of where it all started.
And these are the stories that, Neil Young, David Crosby, Joni Mitchell, these people that you met sort of by happenstance. These are the stories that I think must be put down into a book. They would make a great book, because I'm just sitting here in awe of these, of what you're telling, and it's quite an amazing serendipity to what you're telling. Now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here on this, but I have just finished Kenny Loggins' book, and everybody knows pretty much, for the three people who may not, you are most famous as the duo of half of Loggins and Messina, and when you and Kenny found each other, if I'm interpreting what he wrote correctly and the way it happened correctly, you obviously are a very versatile musician, but you're also a very skilled engineer, and you were looking to be a producer to produce other stars, and you were looking to produce Kenny Loggins and have him out front. Am I correct in that?
Well, yes. It's sort of, I had produced Poco and Buffalo Springfield before I ever met him.
Right.
And I had also produced records before I met the Buffalo Springfield. I started out very early in life. In fact, at 15 years old, I had made my first album. And at 16, I started working for Ibis Records as a record producer while I was still in high school. So by the time I got to Kenny, I'd already signed an independent production deal with Columbia Records, and my first artist to produce was supposed to be Andy Williams. And I turned Andy down, not because he's not a great artist, but because he wasn't a wonderful singer. Of all the singers I know, he's one of the very few that is absolutely wonderful and recognizable, but I was too young, I felt, to produce him, so I turned him down. The next artist that came along was Olivia Newton-John, who, again, wonderful singer, wonderful talent, but I did not want to be a pop record producer.
Right.
I wanted to work with artists who wrote their own songs and were performing artists. To me, that's where the credibility for me as a producer and what I can do best. The next artist that came along that had wanted me to work with him was Dan Fogelberg. Now, Dan Fogelberg, I thought would be a great artist for me to record. But one of the questions, and I always ask this when someone asks me to work with them, I asked him, I said, so what is it about me that you would choose to want to produce your record? Because I'm looking to see what are their expectations, and I want to make sure I can live up to them. And he says, well, I'll tell you the truth. He says, I want to make a Poco record. And at that moment, my heart dropped, because I left Poco for one of the reasons is that our music was too rock for country stations. They turned us down.
Right.
And they were too country for rock stations. They turned us down.
Right.
While we could sell out theater after theater, we could not sell records. And I told Dan, I said, I have to tell you the truth. I cannot make a Poco record. I just spent the last 3 years of my life trying to do that, and it didn't turn out right now. If you want a Poco record, you're going to have to find somebody else to make it for you, because the most I could make was $125 a week to support a wife and 2 dogs. And I said, I can't do it. So I turned that down. I was already 6 months or so into my contract, already been paid. And that summer, in the summer of 1970, I finished making the Poco album, producing it, called Deliverance. And I was approached by a guy who was working under Clive Davis, Don Ellis, who was working in artist development. And he came to me while I was still in New York and said, I have a dear friend, Dan Loggins is his name. We worked at Tower Records, and he has a little brother, and we just really think he's very talented. And would you be interested in hearing some of his music? We got some tapes. And I said, yeah, but not until I get home, not until I finish this project. I'd be closer to